What is it really like being a digital nomad? In this video, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hey, what's up guys? My name is Deanna. I am a digital nomad on a spiritual and physical journey. In today's video, we're going to talk about what it's actually like to be a digital nomad. What's it like to travel full-time while working? Well, it's not always easy. Actually, I think it's a lot more difficult than having a home base and living in one place the majority of the time. Now, don't get me wrong, I would never discount all of the amazing aspects of life as a nomad, and there are so many of them. Seeing many new places, getting to work from so many beautiful locations, making friends all around the world, getting to avoid your least favorite weather conditions, getting to eat the most authentic versions of all of your favorite cuisines, and often even saving money compared to a standard lifestyle depending on where you're from. But since there is no shortage of content highlighting all of the benefits to life as a nomad, I'm sure you've seen it on YouTube, on Instagram, on every social media, everyone's showing their beautiful lives. This is amazing, and it is. However, just like any lifestyle, there are challenges. And so today I want to focus on the things that make being a digital nomad a little bit more challenging. The first thing is that comfort zones are almost non-existent. So we all like to enjoy our comfort zone from time to time, but when you're a digital nomad traveling all the time, you often don't have access to things that feel familiar to you. And so it's a lot more difficult to just hide in your shell and revert to the things that feel more comfortable to you. If you've watched Yes Theory on YouTube, you're probably familiar with the phrase, seek discomfort, and this is truly the way of life for digital nomads. We are constantly seeking discomfort, and we really have to learn to embrace it. Otherwise, you can quickly spiral into a state of negativity, and once you get into that state, it snowballs, and no one wants that. I cannot stress this enough. The most important thing when being a digital nomad is your mindset. But it is definitely true that life starts at the end of your comfort zone. The next thing is that this lifestyle requires a lot of detachment. Depending on how quickly you move, a lot of times, just as soon as you do acclimate to your new environment, it could be time to leave. There are some places where I acclimate super quickly, feeling very at home within a few days or even right away. And there are other places where I can spend a month and not feel totally comfortable until that entire month is over. And of course, there are other places where I never feel totally comfortable. And you never know which it's going to be until you actually arrive in the place. And largely, this is where location astrology comes in. I always check my charts, but without having actually experienced all of these different aspects of my own chart before, it's not until I'm there, until I realize how these energies that I'm looking at are going to affect me. So I personally want to start moving around a bit more slowly, having a few months rather than 1 or 2 months in each place. I would like to really push my visa time, staying as long as a visa will allow. In some places, this is practically indefinite because you can do visa runs many times. A lot of times you only have to cross the border and come back without having a certain amount of time spent out of the country in order to reset your visa. And so for me, moving around every 1 to 2 months, I really think that I would benefit and gain even more experience from staying in places, especially places that I already know that I love and feel comfortable for longer periods of time. Hey guys, Sleepy Deanna editing here. So I don't think I got my point across on this as clearly as I would have liked to, but basically what I mean in terms of staying places that are relaxing to me for longer periods of time is that the more time that I have to actually relax, it gives me more opportunity to integrate the lessons that come up through all of the challenges and to maintain overall lower stress levels and just higher levels of health. So that's my intention for staying in places for longer. It basically just makes you a more well-rounded person, a more well-rounded traveler, and gives me more energy to go out on these trips for longer periods of time without needing to go home. So sometimes when you're getting ready to leave a place, it feels like a relief and I cannot wait to leave. And then there are other times where I'm literally in tears because I'm going to miss the people that I've met there and the places that I love there so much. This kind of feels like a double-edged sword, but I've gotten a lot better at managing this over time. I have developed a greater sense of detachment, and when it comes time to leave people and places that I truly don't know if I will ever see them again, I tend to now focus on the more positive aspects of being grateful for the time that I had there and with them, rather than thinking, what if I never see them again? What if I never come here again? What if I never see this food again in my life? So in a lot of ways, being a digital nomad is largely about truly learning to embrace the ever-changing cycle that is life. The next thing may seem a little obvious to some people, but for someone like me who has always enjoyed and really needs a lot of alone time in order to recharge and feel my best, this has been a surprise to me. Being a digital nomad can get very lonely. The most obvious part of this is that I miss my people back home so much. There are no words to describe how much I miss my people. And so it becomes really important to cultivate community wherever you go. And for me, this can be a bit of a challenge because I really need to find like-minded people. And so I'm always seeking out spiritual events, finding events where people who think like me would be going. Because if I spend time with people who are not like-minded in certain ways, like I really need to be able to talk about spirituality and consciousness, just the nature of life, other healing modalities and things like that. If I'm spending time with people who don't understand those things and are really caught up in 3D mindsets, hanging out with them tends to leave me feeling more lonely than I would have been if I had just stayed by myself. But then the double-edged sword here is that when I do meet these soul fam, like truly, if you are a spiritual person, rest well knowing that there is soul fam spread throughout the globe, sharing their medicine, sharing their healing, living in alignment, living from the heart. And it's such a beautiful thing. But at the same time, when I do meet these people, the level of connection that we develop is so authentic, it's so raw, it's so vulnerable, it's just so real that when I do leave these people, I really miss them. And so then, if and when I do go to live in the United States for longer periods of time, or even when I move on to another location where this particular person is not there, there might be another person there, but I miss that person's particular energy. Because of the depth of that connection, it leaves me like, as much as I miss these people back home, I'm missing now the people that I've met here. But one thing that I want to say about this is thank goodness for technology. Being a digital nomad has never been easier for a lot of reasons, and this is one of them. There are a lot of friends that I don't catch up with very often, maybe once every few months. But when we do catch up, we tend to end up being on the phone for about 5 hours, and when you're in that long of a phone call, it practically feels like you hung out and spent the day together. So yes, I get a lot less of my time with my soul fam back home. However, when I do get to reconnect with them, it is so nourishing. It truly feels like we're in the same physical space, and it is so rewarding. The next thing I want to talk about is cultural exhaustion. So cultural exhaustion is as real as physical, mental, or emotional exhaustion. This basically just goes back to being out of your comfort zone, but when it's been so long and the culture is so vastly different from what you're used to, it just makes you tired sometimes, and you need to take more time to rest and more time to go within to feel like yourself. When you go within, obviously that allows you to tap in and be able to live more from your heart. The more you're living from your heart, the more accepting you're able to be of different cultures, different ways of living life, which there are so many different ways to live. Nothing is wrong with any of them. They all have their merits, they all have their faults, and when you're living as a digital nomad, you can learn from all of those things and take all those lessons back with you. It's like creating a soup of all of the best parts of the human condition, which leads me to the next thing, and that is getting sick. In the last 4 months, I've been in 5 different countries, and I've been sick more in that time than I had been in the last 4 years. You might even be able to hear it in my voice that I'm still overcoming a cold. I usually never get sick, and so for this to happen, it's an obvious indication to me that I'm experiencing emotional, spiritual, physical, and or cultural exhaustion. Your body always lets you know what's going on inside. So me getting sick is an obvious indicator of all of the different moving parts that I'm working with in this lifestyle that I wouldn't be having to deal with if I was just living in one place. So the best part about this is that this lifestyle has definitely accelerated the lesson that everyone needs to learn, to put our emotional well-being and physical well-being before anything else. Because when those things start to go down, nothing else can even happen, and we end up at a standstill. So this has been a really, really big lesson for me that truly I am still learning, still integrating, and I don't know, I'll keep you updated, I guess. But there are also physical things. Like there's a lot of physical things that you will encounter that you wouldn't encounter if you were living in the place where you grew up. For example, I was recently in a few countries, where the air quality is so not easy to breathe, to be honest. I had a really hard time, like I couldn't even go outside and take a deep breath, which for me is a huge part of my spiritual practice. So not being able to go outside and enjoy the air made everything more difficult, because it's bad for my physical health, but it's also bad for my spiritual and emotional health. And so all of these things end up compounding. That was one of the times that I ended up getting sick. There's also some things that are more common in some places than others. For example, some places are more tolerant of different, I don't even know how to word it, standards of cleanliness and of food and of environments, but my body has definitely never acclimated to that, and therefore I got sick. The next challenge that comes up in nomad life is that you're managing a lot more than you would be at home. There's just so many more moving parts. For example, you're still working the way that you would be at home. However, now there's so many more things to consider. There's planning, all the planning. The planning never ends. I used to travel with very little planning. I would just book a flight, book accommodation, go on my trip, do whatever I felt like doing when I got there. But when you're traveling full time, you can't really do that. First of all, it would be exhausting, and all of the challenges that I mentioned before this one would become compounded, a lot more difficult. So as a digital nomad, it really is necessary to plan, and it takes a lot of time and effort. The next thing is that you have travel days. So you're still working, however, you're losing also days to travel, whether that's flights, trains, buses, however you get around the world. These things take time and they take effort, as does packing up all your stuff to go every single time. And there are just so many things to keep track of. Like your brain is always loaded up with so many things to keep track of, whether it's visa requirements or requirements that have been put in place more recently due to the events of the last 2 years, starting in 2020, that shall not be named. There are so many things to consider. And then of course, there's the time that it takes to actually get settled in your new place. So when I am actually settling in a new place, my productivity goes way down. For me, it tends to take a few days to get settled, although some places I get settled instantly, some places I never feel settled, and I've heard other nomads say that it takes them 2 weeks or more to start to feel settled anywhere. And so this is time and energy that just takes more brain power, it takes more physical power, it takes more emotional strength, and everything else that goes into it. And then there's the financial aspect. So there's the obvious things like the cost of your flights, accommodation, cab rides, getting to and from airports, baggage fees, which are getting increasingly abundant these days, data plans, and unexpected expenses. And when you're traveling, you have a lot more unexpected expenses than you would at home. For example, there's what I like to call the American tax, which I call it the American tax because I'm from the US. I think it also applies to Brits and people from certain other Western countries. But this is basically when people find out where you're from and your cost for a good or service doubles or even quadruples. So it's really funny how many times I have seen this happen, and I actually don't even tell people that I'm American now. In certain countries, especially places where people are really pushy, there's a lot of places where people can become almost aggressive trying to sell their goods. I get it. Everyone is just trying to make a living, but so am I. And so in places like this, I tend to speak, if it's not a Spanish-speaking country, although I haven't been to any Spanish-speaking countries that are like this, I'll speak to them in Spanish and pretend that I don't speak English or don't speak a lot of English. And it's really unfortunate that I feel the need to do this. However, this just goes back to caring for my own mental and emotional well-being. I have to, because it is exhausting. And another aspect of this is that when people see a foreigner abroad, there's this automatic assumption that you're a rich tourist, which I also get, because before I was a digital nomad, I would go on a trip for a week or 2 weeks, and I would have thousands of dollars to spend within that week or two that I had saved up going into it in advance. And I would also be spending on credit cards, which is something that you can do if you only go on vacation once or twice a year. However, I'm not on vacation. I'm living my full-time life. If I was spending thousands of dollars every week, I would be thousands of dollars in the negative. And so a lot of people don't know about digital nomads, and no one would ever just assume that that's what you are. So you end up in these situations where you're just having to navigate that. It's kind of a weird gray area, to be honest. I don't fully know what to make of it. And the next part of this is bureaucracy. Specifically, bureaucracy of unfamiliar places. So if you're from the US, you might think bureaucracy is annoying in America, and sure, it can be, but barely compared to anywhere else. It's just that things outside of certain Western countries are not as straightforward. For example, in the US, if there are business hours listed, those are the hours that that business is going to be open. That's not always true elsewhere. In a lot of places, mostly everywhere, a super slow pace is the norm. So don't expect to get anything done quickly, or don't expect to get things done when they say they're going to be done. You always just kind of have to have in mind that whatever you're told your time is going to be for something, like I usually just double it in my head. And then if it happens sooner than that, cool, it's early. And of course, there's the challenge of not speaking the language. So when official documents or anything really is not written in your own language, you have the aspect of translating, the aspect of communication barriers with the people who are helping you with the service. There's just, again, so many moving parts. And all of this is kind of a recipe for headaches. So it really, like everything else in nomad life, requires being lighthearted, being open-minded, and just being ready to go with the flow. So what are my final thoughts on life as a nomad? Well, at the end of the day, this is an amazing lifestyle. It is such a rewarding way to live. And although there are just as many challenges as there are blessings, it is by far the most rewarding lifestyle that I have ever experienced. It's certainly not for the faint of heart, but you continuously get better at everything along the way, including the way you think, the way you take action. I feel like my mental faculties are sharper, and I feel like I was always someone who could kind of see like all sides of an issue and preemptively think of roadblocks that might pop up and just do anything that I needed to do to make it so that that didn't even come up. Well, now that aspect of myself is so much more refined. And once you start to feel like you're doing it successfully, you realize that you just have so much to be proud of yourself, of your life, and of everything that you are. And that is a big part of what makes this life so rewarding. So thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you are curious about life as a conscious nomad, subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I will see you on the next adventure.